the political side of it, and then there's the real story.
There's a lot to unpack right there. It wasn't quite the interview I thought that was going to be.
There's a reason for it.
This will be officially my favorite podcast I've ever done.
So tell me about the social club. I'm really interested in that. That's probably the thing I'm the most interested to understand what you're doing there.
So that's the graduation of me trying to figure out what to do next in my career and trying to build a business that I have a unique, unfair advantage building. So we'll see how that thesis plays out, right? But it's a private members community for later stage exited entrepreneurs. So it's very much a competitor to Tiger 21. So it'd be similar to, I mean, if you know what that is, then you have an idea of what it is already. But like YPO, EO, they do networking, programming, masterminding for, well, EO is like $2 million earlier stage entrepreneur, YPO is 12 million. And in theory, those two programs can last for forever in terms of like supporting entrepreneurs, and you know, you have your different chapters and whatnot. But I was trying to build something for a post-exit entrepreneur. So we focus on 4 pillars. So obviously business operations, of course, but then you have wealth, so legacy planning, portfolio review, you could have portfolio defense. Then we also focus on health, longevity, wellness, and then influence. So sort of 4 things for a later stage individual. It's already had like their first version of success in life. Basically, I'm building something that would be for myself, but also I mentioned unique, unfair advantage. I bring in a lot of the people that I've had on the podcast as speakers and mentors for the community. So because of the show, I have access to some very interesting people, kind of the same way you do with yours. So those people more or less are inaccessible to the average entrepreneur that has had a 20, 30, 40, $50 million exit, and then some sometimes.
Right.
And that's really what I'm trying to build out. So it's really a private members community, membership fee, monthly networking, quarterly mastermind. We do a lot of experiential stuff. So yes, there is like an educational component. Plus, yeah, it's also fun to go rent out 2 70-foot azimuths and then take them out and have a little bit of like a networking session on a nice boat. But yeah, that's really what I'm working on right now. That's relatively new.
I'm very familiar with Tiger 21 for sure.
Yeah.
Been on Wall Street for 34 years.
Yeah.
I actually got invited to the chapter, one of the chapters in Orange County. I ended up not joining, but it is a really interesting group. I'll tell you, life is serendipity. I'm actually launching a club similar to Tiger 21 called Mach 29. I've had 2 exits. I mean, I was part of 2 exits. I was the founder of one of them and an owner of the other with a bunch of people. And I myself run a lot of public companies and involved in a lot of stuff. And it's always good to have, and one of the things I like to talk about focus, but I'm curious as to when you launched your podcast and kind of why you did it, because it's successful and a lot of people are wanting to do it now, but I don't know, like, in terms of like, how do you believe you had longevity doing this podcast?
So I think that if you're gonna start anything, I mean, my thesis has been the same for any business that I've started. So just to give you a little bit of background as well. So I've also had 2 exits. But the first company that went through an exit event, I was leading sales and marketing. So CRO, did not have equity position in that company, but it was a nice exit. Still contributed quite a bit to that event. And then the second one, I was co-founder, CRO, and then also exited. First one was in telco, second was a broadcast SaaS. So very technical background, but on the sales and marketing side. And when I was building the last company, it really occurred to, like, I'm a marketer at the end of the day, so I'm studying the greats. I'm studying the Gary V's, Seth Godin's, the who, the pick your favorite marketer. And I wanted some longevity to what I was doing. And I knew that it wasn't going to be a 9-figure exit. It wasn't going to be an IPO. It wasn't going to be a huge, enormous company. It was going to be a good exit. But I would have had to have had started from scratch the second I basically exited. And now I have no name in the market. No one knows who I am. And if I want to build anything, it's just a grind. So I'm looking at Gary V and I'm thinking, he has a massive brand, and he launches companies against that audience.
He sure does.
And
So in some
and
biblical
that was
way,
it. Like
for
that,
sure.
like that was like I wanted to have that audience because I didn't know what was going to happen in the future, but I knew that I wanted to launch companies against that audience that I would build over X period of time. So to answer your question, why did I think I could do it? Well, the thesis was if I commit 10 years of my life to trying to build that thing, and I'm a smart individual, and I can reverse engineer what someone else has done to achieve some sort of success in that particular thing, I figure that if I continue with it for an unreasonable amount of time, and for podcasting, 10 years is definitely an unreasonable amount of time, considering the fact that most people don't even release more than 2 episodes. In my mind, I could build at least some semblance of a community that could be useful, and so far that thesis has proven true.
You have a thought process around the number of podcasts and how is it in your mind it's quality over quantity, or is it you want to get as big of a footprint as you can and then sort of filter that down? Because if you're going to launch that community, how big do you need that to be?
So that's a great question, because the way that I did it is not the way that I would recommend people do it. So the way that I did it was look for the biggest guests and have the most diverse conversations, because that's what I enjoyed. And for me to want to do it for a long period of time, I really wanted to enjoy the process of content creation versus what would be smarter for most people would be you focus on tying all the content in the medium that you're creating, whether or not it be newsletter, podcast, to the ideal customer profile that you're trying to target for your business, and then leveraging that as a sales asset, because you're only attracting listeners or audience members that could be buyers for your product or service. So strategically, I didn't tie it back to the thing that I was building at the time, because I knew that I wanted it to outlive what I was building at the time. If I wanted to tie it strategically back, I would have probably built something focused on broadcast and streaming and distribution, and only bring on CMOs of broadcast companies who we were already selling to. That would have been the strategy. That was not the strategy that I deployed. So quality is important. Focus on what you want to accomplish is important. And I think that you could use it strategically as a medium, not just to build a massive audience, but to actually drive revenue in a business if you take a much more focused view than what I originally did. But I mean, at the end of the day, it was sort of like a learning experience when I started, like most people, to start creating. Like, what are you going to use this for? Well, I know that if I stick with it, I'll find a way to use it. But, hindsight's 20/20. And maybe I could have done it a little bit more focused, but I don't really regret how I built it, because it gave me access to some of the most incredible people in the world too. So,
Have you sold anything to your network yet?
no, I haven't. I have not.
So you're just still building. You're still building that before you have this first sell, right? Where you're like, I'm going to launch this product into my network, or is that something you fear doing? Because then that's a different chapter. Or are you not? When do you think you're ready for that?
So, that's a great question. I haven't sold anything into the audience yet, because I feel like you have to build a level of trust before you ask for a sale. And I've always erred on the side of caution, and I want to have this level of trust where I feel that people are true fans of the content that I put out before I ask them for a sale. I think I gravitated in that direction because the market is fundamentally right now going in the opposite direction, where even if you don't have trust, you're asking for a sale and you're selling something that you probably shouldn't even be selling. And I think that I have such an adverse reaction to that style that I went in the complete opposite direction. And for 6 years, I did nothing but audience building and not productizing as quickly as possible. I still monetize. So I'm not oblivious to the fact that there's an ad play and there's a CPM for a business finance audience, and I can sell an ad slot that will guarantee 500,000 impressions to a LinkedIn or a NetSuite or a HubSpot. That's still a play, but it's not going to be as lucrative in terms of business model as I'm selling a widget, coaching, consulting, masterminds, whatever it is, to the audience. So I think I just focused on, and I also thought the second you start selling or gating content, that diminishes your reach significantly. definitely gating. Maybe not selling, but definitely gating. So I think I focused on reach first, and now is the point where I think it's fair to start to monetize.
How do you bring people into the social club? And I'll tell you before you answer that question, I thought
Yeah.
the social club, the way you called it, it's interesting. You must definitely be a marketer because it's almost like you've heard of it, right? You hear, like if you think about what are those things? They're all over the place now. These private. There's one in Malibu. There's one in
Like a private members club, or
yeah,
like
it's called
Soho or something.
Soho. Yeah, Soho. So
Yeah.
it automatically makes me think of something like that, right? Like when you think of the social club, it's a really I wouldn't have thought, oh, the social club is a network for people who had exits, right? I wouldn't have thought that, but
Because nobody wants to be part. Nobody wants to be part of that, though. Like nobody wants to be part of a network that people like don't mind being part of a network of people that have had exits. But why do people stick around EO or YPO or Tiger 21?
right.
It's because of the peers. It's because the camaraderie they build with people that play at the same level as them. That is truly why people stick around, because there are a lot of different groups, and people do want to not only just do business with people that have competed at the same level, but they want to go on trips with people that have competed at the same level. They want to go on they want to they want to be friends. They want to have these people over. And it's not like we have a hack, right? Our podcast, our network is a hack. It's easy to find great people, build good networks. I noticed it when I came down from Toronto to Miami. Uh, a lot of smart people, all very siloed, not huge groups of friends, a little bit apprehensive about which rooms they step into because they don't want to get pitched all the time to put money into this, put money into that. So I think that, it's a cliche, it's lonely at the top. It very much is. And I think that that's why these groups exist. So I'm not trying to, and I appreciate that it sounds familiar and friendly, and that's great. And I think that it was tying back to what am I trying to build? Well, Tiger 21 is an investment group at the end of the day. It's very much focused on investment, even if that's not how they market themselves. Significant portion of it is focused on investment.
Right.
Just because you've had an exit, finance is not the only part of your life. It's one of the pieces.
Sure.
But how many people come on this show and they want to write a book, and they want to increase their thought leadership, and they want to get more followers on Instagram, and they want to start a podcast, and then they're worried about, I want to live longer, so they get a red light spa or sauna, and then they do cold plunges. Like there's so many other aspects to once you've sort of achieved that first level of life that you really you're just trying to figure it out as you go.
How many people could be in the social club in your mind? Like how big of a group could it be?
I mean, the way that we've structured it, I do not want more than 100 people per major city, because once you get past 100 people per chapter or city, then you start to lose meaningful interaction. So I've been thrown into rooms of 200, 250 people, 300 people for EO and YPO. And you don't know everybody, and not everyone's an extrovert. And part of what I envision the chapter head knowing every single individual intimately, what they can give, what they need, and then matchmaking between the members. So it's at the end of the day, it's like business, investment, matchmaking, but concierge, because that doesn't also exist. Many masterminds, many networking groups, people are just thrown into the people pay, and then they're kind of just left to their own devices. Like, show up here, we're gonna put a speaker in a room, and 200 people are gonna show up, and there's some nice hors d'oeuvres and some drinks after. But like, I want this to be beneficial, and that means that you're actually placing people with other individuals who can support each other. That's like the secret sauce in networking that not everybody is comfortable facilitating themselves. So to answer your question, 100 per city, and then we copy and paste the strategy to major cities around the world, which is not complicated, but I don't need 500,000 members for this to be successful.
I don't know if you want to talk about it. What's it cost to be a member? If you don't,
35. Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, it's 35,000 for the year, and that includes monthly networking, quarterly masterminds.
Got it.
That's our price point where we thought in the market, it benchmarks against some of the existing competitors out there. It's cheaper than some of the higher end masterminds. If you look at like I won't name names, but there's masterminds that push over $100,000, which I think is very expensive. The goal is There has to be a business model that makes sense. And we want to make sure that people that are joining, we do a lot of vetting and due diligence on the front end to make sure people are who they say they are, they've had the success that they have achieved. And then that they're comfortable at least putting this amount of money in, because for the people that would be ideal fits for community, this amount of money is not significant.
What's SDC Holdings?
So this is my holding company. So after I exited, then I started getting into angel investing. I was not good at it. And then I moved into private equity because I found that pre-revenue, early stage, and they were not huge checks. We're talking like $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 checks. I realized very quickly that a good operator does not make a good investor. And sometimes vice versa too. So then I focused on private equity acquisitions where I do deal by deal, SPV, deploy capital, bring in some LPs, buy a company in a category that I actually understood. And that would be where last company was acquired 4 years ago. So that's the past 4 years. That's sort of been my investor life.
Yeah, we're somewhat similar. I'm doing a lot of private equity, a lot of private deals. That's what I was kind of going back to my original question, which was that it seems like now the default is most people want to be a private investor. It's just what I'm seeing and hearing is there's way more money in private markets now. Way more money in private credit, way more money in private access, LPs that want to be private. Obviously, they may want to have an exit, but it sure seems after the pandemic and the uptick we had in GameStop and all the kind of craziness of what was happening with all these young people getting checks, is that sort of fading away? And are you seeing it that most people just only want to talk about being private, or
I think that I'm going to take it a step further. I think that most people, there's like this glamour around angel investing and SaaS startup and venture capital that I think is misplaced. So not only and I see it a lot from people that are operators turned investors. I see people on LinkedIn talking about their tech portfolio, for example, which is mostly all private, right? Like it's like Series A at most. For some reason, Silicon Valley got a lot of smart people excited about becoming VC. And they see it's either Jason Calacanis. And
I literally was just going to say, it's like a J. Cal moment, right? I mean, that's really what he's doing, right? He's got everyone jacked about that, right?
Awesome. But first of all, VC has a massive failure rate. Angels get screwed all the time because they don't even have the resources that a proper VC firm that raised a fund has. And they don't even know, they don't even look at public markets. It's like they start with VC, they get screwed there, kind of like me, and then they migrate to private equity, because what's private equity? Well, private equity means now I have controlling interest in a company, and I see a historic P&L, and I can kind of see where the company's going, and I can kind of see their track record, hopefully. So at least it de-risks the deal a little bit. And then public markets, it's like, as an operator, what do you want? You always want control. You try and find some semblance of control because that's what you've done well so far.
Sure.
So public markets seems like you've just given up control. Whereas private equity, it's like I feel like I have a little bit of control. I can sort of tell, I can hire a good operator. I don't want to be an operator. I can hire a good operator, but I know the growth levers they can pull. I can kind of see what they've done so far and what they could do. So I feel like some semblance of control and slightly de-risked. So I think that's where people gravitate towards. I don't have an answer as to why public markets are not as prominent in someone's mind when they make money, outside the fact that no one's marketing them. No, there's no big podcast talking about how I've done well in public markets. It seems almost like for the average investor, they invest in what they know, and most people did not build a publicly traded company, so they go back to what they understand. I really think that's it, but I don't know for sure. Just a thought.
I've been asking, I'm going to start doing it actually probably with you, but you might be the first I've actually decided I'm going to ask this question of everyone I talk to, but how's AI affecting your business?
AI has radically expedited everything we do. So I've not removed anybody, but I would say they probably work a quarter of the time they did pre-AI. So wow. I have deployed AI to everything in mostly in my content business. So I would say the podcast is a business, content is a business. And even marketing for like the social club, there's AI components, but video editing, audio mastering, podcast cutting and clipping, graphic design, copywriting. So basically most first pass at creative tasks has been executed now by AI with a smart person to review the first version of that and then edit it up, massage it a little bit before it goes out into the world. But that's reduced, like no lie, but probably 75 to 85% of the workload for my content.
Yeah, we have a new chief marketing officer who I started yesterday, and one of the things she's been pitching me the last couple of months is she said, you can take all the videos you want to edit and have them edited in AI.
Yeah.
And then as long as you watch the first pass, you can pretty refine it pretty quickly.
100%.
So she's editing most of her videos in AI, which I was like, wow, I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah, so Opus.Pro is great, takes long form, turns it into, about 20 different short form clips. And again, it's the first pass, right? It can't be the final product, but the first pass, what would that take? It would take somebody to listen to a 30, 60-minute podcast. There's 30 to 60 minutes already. Find the most viral clips, clip them out, export 20 different clips. That's probably like 3 or 4 hours of work.
Right.
So AI just took that and did it in 15 minutes with no human interaction whatsoever.
It's astonishing. It's astonishing. I love one of your quotes, success isn't a straight line, it's a messy, twisty, sometimes backward feeling journey. I've been working on this refinement of like, how do you, in my life, my wife says to me all the time, the things that happen to you, even once, if it happened to the average person, they would not continue. I'm curious as to, along your journey of where you've been, how many times have you had a moment where you thought, this is it, it's not going to work out?
Oh, almost like every day. Like in all seriousness, it's almost every day. Yeah. So this would be what we're doing right now. Is my second show of the day. So I did a show this morning. I had to drive somewhere for it. Drove back to my house where I have the studio, and then we're doing this show. We're doing another show after. Then I'm speaking tonight, and I just lay down for like 30 minutes. I'm like, what the fuck am I? What the fuck am I doing?
Yeah,
because I'll be up from like 6 in the morning till probably 2 today.
Yeah.
Like when it's all said and done, all the driving. So, and nothing even went wrong. And there's like 10 billion things that could also go wrong. God, like knock on wood, nothing does. But like every single day. So I think that this is a concept that I really think is very important for people. I hope it doesn't sound too silly, but it means a lot to me at least. So if you're going to build anything, kind of like what your wife said, like if any things that happen to you, you're sued, you get fired, you have to fire an employee, you have to lay off people, whatever. It doesn't matter. There's a million different things. You're getting death threats, God forbid. I think you have to really keep track of the wins in your life because those negative moments really imprint. And this is why news cycles are so negative, because they imprint on your mind to a much greater degree than anything positive that happens. So like however you want to do it, whatever works for you, it could be writing it down, it could be putting it in a Word doc, it could be like reviewing the cool shit that you've posted on Instagram. Whatever it is, just be very cognizant of all the wins that you have, because they help you get over those huge losses when you realize that, like, I've won 5,000 times this week, so maybe this one event is not indicative of who I am as a professional and a person. I think that's very important.
Right.
Because I think that one negative event for a lot of people is like all consuming, and it can really sideline you.
Before you had your exit with your last company, did you raise a lot of capital around it?
No, we didn't. We only raised $1 million.
Only raised $1 million. Well, yeah, I've a different, it's a strange footprint. It's everyone's level of success is, it's good to see this. I'm sometimes you get caught up in your own universe and you don't realize that there's lots of forms of different success in what people do, and raising $1 million. I raised $500 million. We're still not there, right? So I think to myself, that's not good. Well, it's not bad.
That's
but
a lot of money.
There's a lot of ways to do this, right?
Yeah.
I'm mesmerized by the Success Story podcast, and it says #1 entrepreneur in top 10 business podcast. How do you think you got there?
I'm a marketer, and I stuck with it for 6 years. I mean, that's the easy answer. The less obvious, or the less simple answer is every show goes into about 50 different pieces of content. So I draw the audience in, and I don't assume that just because it's a podcast, people like podcasts. So it goes into a whole bunch of short form. It goes into a blog on my website, which is SEO optimized. It goes into a newsletter. Now I have 320,000 on the email list. It goes into tweets. It goes into graphics that I post on Instagram. So in terms of a content strategy, it build once and distribute everywhere repeatedly. The second thing would be you want to collaborate with people that have also earned trust with their audience. So a lot of collaboration with other great creators like yourself. That's a huge way to grow a show. And then lastly, I'm a marketer, remember that. So I do the gamut of marketing activities for podcasts, but I'll also promote the show 2 ways on other podcasts, which is huge. So we can do cross-posting of episodes, meaning that I'm going to drop one of my episodes in someone else's feed. They're going to drop their episode in my feed. So what I'm doing with that is I'm basically fishing where there's fish, right? I'm not saying I'm going to go advertise in a newsletter and say, here's my podcast. I'm literally going where people already have, who already love podcasts are, and saying, come check out mine. So the friction in turning them into a subscriber or a listener is much lower. And then I also run paid. So performance marketing is fine. You have to find a way to make it sustainable. And you can run ads on Facebook, on Google, on anywhere. But the only place I run ads is where other podcasters are. So I'll run ads in different podcast apps because, again, I'm trying to reduce the cost of acquisition of that customer, reduce the friction in turning them into an actual listener or subscriber. And you rinse and repeat that over 500 episodes in 6 years.
So YouTube's big. Do you monetize on YouTube? Do you let ads run?
I let ads run, but that's not where the majority is. So for the podcast, how I've monetized it is just through advertisers. So there's a CPM. I have 5 agencies that sell for me. And right now, actually, to be honest, there's not that many ad slots left. But from the get-go, I've basically said, listen, when I started the show, I didn't have the resources to hire a full sales team. So let other people work for me, take a split. They fill the ads, and then those ads are cross-posted to the audio feed as well as on YouTube. But YouTube monetization, I find, is really insignificant compared to like host-read ads that I get from anyone from a LinkedIn to a NetSuite to Athletic Greens. That kind of advertiser does.
And when you run those ads, you just edit it into your overall preparation for your podcast, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So you're responsible for that. It's not like a video network feed that inserts immediately. No, you do insertion.
No. I do insertion. So right now, I mean, fortunate now that I have a team that supports, right? So I'll record like a host read ad, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. But I won't I'll record it audio. And interesting enough, very soon, I'm sure that I could train an AI tool to actually replicate my voice, but we haven't gone that far yet. So I'll record a 36-second ad. They'll turn it into an audio video version of that ad, and they'll do like a capture of the particular client's website. Maybe they'll show some B-roll. Maybe they'll show some clips from one of the client's YouTube videos showing what their product does, whatever it is. Turn it into a 30 to 60-second audio video clip, and then we insert that into the podcast.
Wow, got it, for sure. Who's your favorite guest so far you've had? Like, of all the guests,
That's not a fair question.
I know I know it's not fair because I saw Grant Cardone, Guy, Scaramucci. I've had Grant, I've had Scaramucci. I haven't had Patrick, David. I haven't had some of these people, but obviously I was a big fan of Grant Cardone back in the day, and so I was pretty excited. I think he was on one of my first podcasts. It might even been my first podcast.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a good first guest. That's a very good first guest.
I knew Grant, and I basically said, I'm coming to see you, and you're going to be on my podcast. He agreed, so it was really not that hard. But I'm curious as to who your favorite's been.
I would say there's a reason why this guy was my favorite, because he's the guy that got me started in podcasting. So it's actually Seth Godin. Seth Godin was one of my favorite interviews, and he's a big marketer. So he's been around for a long time. Long time. He writes an awesome blog daily. He's known for that. And the only reason why it was so important for me is because I remember I chose to start podcasting when I was listening to his podcast. And one of the lines that he said was about Icarus and flying too close to the sun. But then he followed up with, like, don't worry, trust me, if you fly too close to the sun, you won't get burned, which is obviously a little bit slightly a different version of the Icarus story. But that was like, I remember hearing that line. I'm like, there was like a whatever, F it, I'm going to do this kind of moment.
Right.
And that's when I started my show. So when I had him on, whatever, 4 years later, it was a nice, like, full circle moment. I come back to this thesis of, I want to teach as many people as possible and help as many people as possible based on what I've learned in my life. And if I can accomplish that, I think that the money will figure itself out. And I believe that. I truly do believe that. So whether or not people sign up, like, I mean, I'm not telling everybody who listens to my show, like, hey, you got to spend 35 grand. To be honest, my show is actually probably earlier stage entrepreneurs. It's probably not even all, it's definitely not all exited, but I'd say probably a fraction of it is exited entrepreneurs. So it doesn't really fit for me to sell hard through the show, but it wouldn't make a difference. Even if it was perfectly targeted, I'm a big fan of like demand generation. Like, I want to be so good and create a product so good and create a voice so good and build so much trust that you gravitate towards me, because that's how the best companies are built. The best companies are not forcing you to buy their product. The best companies are pulling you in because their product is so phenomenal.
Right.
And there's more than one way to build a business, but I find the businesses that have longevity are the businesses that figure out how to do that the best.
What's your numbers now? What's your podcast, like, what are your views or downloads?
So right now it ranges between 700,000 and 1 million per month.
Wow. That's a big footprint.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
it's
great.
Not bad.
Congratulations. Wow.
Thank you.
And are you when you got to that kind of number, do you feel like a lot more pressure to put out more quality content, or do you feel like it's just the same as before, you pay no attention to the number?
I think when you get to that level, you have either on purpose or just through repetition gotten better at the content you create because you've done it so many times. So a podcast is really a casual, like, long form medium. And the goal is to create an environment where the person is comfortable talking. I think that what we're trying to do when we podcast and what people actually respond to well is we're trying to take the conversation, like, say we were hanging out in my living room having a drink. We're trying to take that conversation and replicate it here. But the second you press record, there's a level of stress. People are, worried, are you judging me? What's your audience going to think? What's my audience going to think? So the level of stress, it removes that like laissez-faire, casual, almost like shooting the shit kind of conversation that people actually come to podcasts for. So after doing it for 500 times, I think the end goal is you actually just end up being able to act like you would without recording with the person that you're chatting with. And I think that vibe creates, when you put two smart people together, you'll totally recognize this. It creates just a great conversation because you just have two smart people shooting the shit, challenging each other's ideas. And then you do that 500 times and the content starts to take care of itself in a way, because you start to understand, okay, what question can I ask to get the best possible response out? How do I create an environment where the person sort of like puts down their guard and their shield and opens up a little bit? So yeah, I do want to create better content. I feel a little bit of pressure, but I felt more pressure creating shittier content at the beginning because I had no idea what I was doing.
How hard is it for you to get guests nowadays? I know you're getting 1 million views a month, so that's big. So everyone's going to want to get there. But like your process for getting them, I was just with Sean Kelly on my podcast the other day, I think it was 2 days ago, and Sean told me he DMs people directly, and that's how he gets them. Do you have a system that you like to use to get people on your podcast?
So I built relationships with agents from HarperCollins, Simon Schuster, a couple larger like talent like representation agencies, Anderson, CAA, not like the whole agency, like people within the agency. And whenever somebody notable writes a book, they usually reach out to me. I'm on like the list of like some of the bigger business shows. A second strategy that I've used that was a little bit more proactive, because obviously when you first start, you can't really build those relationships, is I would go on Amazon, because I always listen. If you're trying, this is my sales brain thinking. If I want to get somebody on my show, I have to think, what do they want to accomplish? What reason do they have for coming onto my show outside of just I have an audience? Usually, in a traditional sales strategy, there's something called intent, right? There's intent, and you can actually find the intent of somebody. How soon do they actually have to buy that product or service? Is there a meaningful event in their life that's going to prompt them to make that buying decision in 2 months as opposed to a year, right? So what's the intent for an author? Well, they're releasing a book on September 15th, and they got to get on a show to promote it, because if they don't, no one's going to buy their book. So now there's intent. There's a meaningful event in their life. So what I would do, and this is kind of what I'm getting from all these book publishers like Penguin and Harper and Simon, what I used to do is I go on Amazon and I'd filter by up and coming business books and rank them by most popular to least popular, and look at the people that were releasing books in the next 2 months, and then I would cold DM them. And it wouldn't always work, but it would increase the likelihood of them responding and saying yes. And they'd say, hey, go speak to my PR person. And I'd go speak to the PR person. The person's like, awesome, you have a great podcast. We were already planning on doing a media tour, so we'll just add you on. So it was just right time, and then finding a way to figure out what that right time was for somebody that could have been my target guest. And then also what Sean does now, because I have an audience, now I can just DM. But I can't DM, for example, Elon Musk, and I can't DM Mark Cuban, but I can DM a lot of people. But I still have to be strategic with people that are, like always the next tier, right? There's always another tier. It's never ending. So a little bit of strategy and aligning with a meaningful event in that person's life really makes a difference when you're trying to book them as a guest.
What do you think of Lex's podcast?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's long, right? It's super long.
Really long. It takes me days to get through it because I don't have 3 hours to sit around. Although
they just did like a 6 hour. It was one he just did was 6 hours.
The guests he has are fascinating. I mean, I listened to the entire Jeff Bezos one. I've listened to I think so many of them. So he does have my ear. But I was curious as to what you thought about his style.
I think that you have to find a format that your audience likes. I mean, I like Lex's podcasts, but I don't always listen to them because I can't afford the time. So I also like Tim Ferriss's podcasts because they're like an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. Do I like them? Yeah, but like, does it matter if I like them? It just matters if a lot of people like them, and it matters if you like producing them, because that's what's going to keep you staying with it for a long period of time. So I like some of them.
No one ever tells me my podcasts suck. In fact, I always have people tell me the podcasts are good, but they don't seem to be growing anywhere. It's not like I have these podcasts that are going parabolic. In fact, I promote a lot of them, and it's probably because I'm not doing the job you are of doing the right kind of promotion. I'll have to work on that. But I'm curious as to the feedback you got. Was it only that you got it because people watched them, or did you actually get people tell you that sucks, that doesn't suck? Do you get feedback?
No, I don't think many people. I don't think many people really criticize your work or are really even honest with your work, and especially the people that feel comfortable. So the people, it's tough, right? Because you have people on the internet. You have people on the internet that unless they really, really hate you, or they're really big fans and you disappoint them, they're generally going to leave, for podcasts at least, relatively positive reviews. Like if you look at the podcast reviews, if you're trying to build a Twitter audience, it's probably a little bit more ruthless than a podcast review audience. But even your friends, it is ruthless. But your friends are not gonna. Your friends are probably not even gonna. Your friends are probably gonna tell you you're awesome and probably not listen to your show. So I mean,
Yeah, I've noticed that.
I
By the
look-
way, I've noticed that a
Yeah.
lot where people say, "Oh, I love that podcast," and some of them have really watched it, but the vast
Yes.
majority of them don't even look at it. They're like, "Oh yeah, I saw that you had him on as a guest." Well, did you remember that part? Oh, I didn't watch it. Oh, okay, thanks.
So I don't look for. I haven't felt comfortable trusting feedback as like the feedback that I'm getting as a huge mechanism or a huge data point for whether or not I'm doing a good job. I look at watch time. If somebody sticks around for 45 minutes or 50 minutes and consumes 75% of a podcast, that was a good podcast. I'll unpack how that podcast went. I'll transcribe it. I'll look at the questions that I asked. I'll look at basically everything versus something that had 25% completion rate. I just trust the market.
Do you help people with podcasts, or is that not a product you sell?
So it wasn't a product I sell, but you know how many people have pushed me to do that?
Because I was about to do that and tell you should do that, but that's another. Like, who the hell am I to tell you what to do? You got 1 million listeners a month, but
Everyone's telling me to do it.
It's
like
fascinating.
Very notable people are saying, "Hey, like roll out a playbook for starting a show."
So do you like to run your business? I've sort of felt this lately as I've been at this for a long time. I'm 54. I've been at it for 34 years. I always tell people I've made like every single failure there is. Like if any stupid shit you could ever do, I pretty much have done it. And I try not to do the same stupid shit. Even sometimes then I repeat the stupid shit. But, you know, I'm curious after you had your exit and now, do you, when I was younger, I used to say, a person would say, "Oh, you know, you only want 100,000 from me. I have to do the same work for 100,000 I do for 10 million. It's not worth my time." And I used to get mad, like, it's not worth my time. But we're doing 200 million a year, and I say to people, like, it's an interesting idea, but you're at 0 and I'm at 200 million, and I don't even know where I would put you. And you evolve. So have you evolved in your mind about what you want your daily life to look like? Because you just talked about, I'm going to be up at 6 and be done at 2, and I presume you mean 2 at night, by the way.
Yes,
Yeah.
not 2 in the
So
afternoon.
do you find yourself saying, "Hey, I only want to do these behaviors and I'm going to limit what I do," whereas maybe you didn't limit yourself before, you were willing to do anything versus now you're not willing to do everything?
So yes. So, I mean, I think part of my success was that I was willing to do anything like in startup land, like I would code a website. I'd figure it out, right? Like I'd set up my first ad set on Facebook. If I didn't have the budget to hire somebody to do it, I'd figure out, so I'd do all of it. At this stage, the goal is to basically find talent that's better than you as soon as possible. So find a way to hire the right people. Like when I say I'm up till 2 in the morning, I'm up till 2 in the morning because I'm doing 2 podcasts and a speaking gig tonight. Like that's not something I can outsource. So I focus on tasks that require me and me building my thought leadership or me teaching over a skill set that I've learned to somebody who can actually execute on it versus doing it myself. It's not because I'm better than by any means. I could step in anytime, but I think it's just you have to leverage and you have to remove yourself from a lot of the day-to-day and the minutia and get yourself out of the weeds. But yeah, I think that's the natural mindset of somebody who's building something a second or a third time because they just want it to move quicker and they understand how to leverage capital and leverage talent and leverage media and leverage anything to just free up more of their day. That's the only way to really build without losing your mind, to be quite honest, and having some semblance of a work-life balance.
I want to go back to a messy, twisty, and sometimes backward feeling journey. So I have discovered for myself that if I forecast where I want to be in 10 years, there's all kinds of shit along the way, but the 10-year goal kind of still stays there. So you just remind yourself where you're going. So where do you want to be like in 5 or 10 years, like with the Success Podcast and with what you're doing with the Social Club? Sort of where do you see yourself in 60 months from now? Where do you see yourself in 10 years from now?
So in 60 months from now, 10 years is a long time. 10 years is a very long time. I think that the goal will be to keep the podcast in all seriousness for the rest of my life. I don't think there's any exit plan for that because I think it's an asset that I can leverage for any next opportunity. In terms of, I mean, I could put a download number on it right now. I kind of look at Diary of a CEO that hits about 20 million downloads a month. And right now I'm building out a full studio, like a very high quality studio. So the production level will increase, and like that's the benchmark. But I don't even think, I mean, more people are coming online, more people are consuming content. There's more creators, there'll be more competition, but I don't even think you need 10 years to get there. But maybe you do, but that would be the goal. So the goal is to be like, say 5 to 10 million subscribers on YouTube, have a podcast that's hitting that kind of reach in the US would be a phenomenal accomplishment for a success story. But then again, that would just scale over time. So if it's 5 years, 10 years, that's great. I don't want to get rid of it ever. For Social Club, I need to scale that. I want to get, so if we do the math, you're looking at about $3.5 million in run rate per city in top line revenue. I would like to scale that to roughly, at this point, and you know, ideas change, but at this point, $40 to $50 million in revenue. So we're looking, you know, do the math on how many cities we're actually going to try and copy and paste this model to. And I would say that I would put that as my maybe not my 5-year goal, but my 7-year goal. But that could easily be expedited or drawn out. It depends. But the point is, that is where I would like to take this business in terms of revenue before I start entertaining maybe like a private equity buyout. Because I think that would be like, I would like to have a 9-figure exit in my career. That would be like a milestone for me. If I have a 9-figure exit, then that would sort of push me down the path of starting my first fund. So I mentioned that I was doing deal by deal SPV. I would like to raise a fund, and I would like to deploy as a first version of private equity between $500 to $1 billion worth of capital or assets under management. And that would be, I mean, that's not even 10-year, that could be a 20-year goal, but that would be where I'd like to end up and start to reinvest into companies that I think can have a massive impact on the world, whether or not it's earlier stage or later stage. But I think I'd actually like, you know, you're talking about your career and what you've done and the assets you've deployed. That's where I'm heading. Like, that's really what I want to do, because I feel like to have a true impact on the world, you have to create, I think impact starts at $1 billion worth of value. I think you can have a small exit and you're going to die and no one's going to know who you are. But I think when you deploy capital, build something that is at least valued at $1 billion plus, that's when you start having true impact on the world and the market. And that's really right now where my North Star is.
Wow. Scott, appreciate your time. I like that a lot. I've learned a lot from you on the podcast today.
You know, I'm going to explain to you real quick. But don't roll on yet. There's a reason for it.
So I did get that right. I did get that right.